Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. Before we get started, I wanted to remind people to check out the show notes for useful links. But in today's episode, I wanted to continue discussing E&Y's potential split up, potential IPO. And there was another great article in the Australia Financial Review. Again, I think Australia Financial Review is good at covering this because the Big Four are bigger in Australia as far as jobs go, so they're covered more frequently than in the U.S. But Australia Financial Review had an article called "Another Accenture: Why E&Y Would Want to Split into Two," and they first talk about how there's a sense of deja vu for older former partners at Big Four consulting firms Deloitte, KPMG, and PwC, because they say 2 decades ago the veterans watched as the Big Four they got rid of their consulting arms. And if you remember, this is because of Sarbanes-Oxley. And well, it's because of Enron and Sarbanes-Oxley that shortly followed thereafter. Most people don't even remember that because it's so long now. I'm not even sure if they teach that stuff in accounting schools anymore. But they also said that Deloitte attempted to get rid of their consulting arm, but the dot-com bust created, I guess, the ability to get rid of that. But I don't know if that's true because not all of the Big Four accounting firms IPO their consulting arms, and Accenture is an example of a consulting arm that went public. And this article goes on to say that senior EY leaders are worrying about losing control of the narrative. A clear and credible explanation for why the partnership is splitting up the firm, and they're also concerned about the inability of partners around the world to answer even basic questions from staff about what is happening. Global chairman and CEO Carmine DeCibio resorted to telling staff that their well-being and career development would be central to any decisions made about splitting the firm into parts. And this is what I discussed on a couple of podcasts ago as well, about how he sent out this email about the worrying about staff's well-being, and it's just poorly timed. It's not a good. He did not send the message well. He has not followed up on it, and this article does a good job of saying how they might lose the narrative of this. And the article goes on to talk about the Accenture IPO, how they raised nearly 1.7 billion, and with the market capitalization now around 200 billion or 200 billion plus. So, and the article talks about how partners now, they're looking at this because they're looking at a payout, a huge payout. And that's what I discussed before about how partners are, and I don't know if any of the people who wrote this article listen to this podcast, but it's the partners are looking for a payout, and that would be one of the biggest reasons to do it. But I think the one thing that might keep it from doing this, keep E&Y from doing this, is that the public markets are pretty weak right now. I mean, just the economy around the world is weak right now, so you're not going to get as good enough price. But the other side of that is that partners get a one-time payout. And as I said, senior partners are going to be the ones making the most decisions, and they're going to be the ones towards the end of their career and looking for any kind of payout. They don't care what kind it is. And partners at other firms said that a split is not inevitable. And it says there is no compelling reason for E&Y leaders to disrupt the operation of the firm by breaking it apart. I would agree with that. And another thing too of why they might not want to do it is I think just the complexity of dealing with it and the cost benefit, especially now you might lose people. If Carmine DeCibio had to issue that email, then they know now that they might lose people. And I also think I think this was just a rumor that was going around. I'm not sure that it was 100% when the rumor got out. And especially people talk about that there's a conflict of interest. The only real one that I could see that could be influencing is that the technology ones that we spoke about previously. But this article does a good job of giving the benefits and costs and benefits of E&Y splitting itself up and the history of the big four accounting firms splitting up their consulting arms. But another good article that came out, not from Australia Financial Review, but from Fortune, talked about how Kelly Greer, who's the U.S. CEO of E&Y, is leaving the firm at the end of this month, and that was already in the plans because we spoke about that too on this podcast about her leaving earlier. That was already in the plans, but what we did not know, and I guess I'm guessing either she leaked or somebody else leaked to Fortune that she did not get along with Caroline DeCibio, um, which would make sense why she would leave because if you don't get along with the global CEO or he doesn't get along with you or he doesn't want you to take over his job because she was in line to do that, then of course you'd want to leave. And I also think it's interesting the big four accounting firms are some of the most progressive corporations. They're not corporation partnerships, but they've all had female CEOs leave their position and not go any higher after being the head of the US firms. And Deloitte, KPMG, and now E&Y all had females. So they're not good at retaining females, especially in leadership positions, which is a big deal. And then that also leads me to thinking that she could have potentially been the one that leaked this, or somebody in her camp or close to her could have been leaking this to sort of undermine him because it caught him off guard. This came out when Carmen DeCibio was in Davos for the World Economic Forum. So I think that if you were going to stab him in the back, that would be the perfect time. And I'm not saying she did that. It could have possibly been her, but it could have been somebody close to her, some other kind of partner that had something against them. And I think that's what the case was. Because I don't even think this thing was a done deal. I think it was just people floating it out there. And it could have been another thing to think about is it could have been a senior partner that wants the payout and wants to put that out there. But this, as I said, I don't think this thing is a done deal. There's too much going on. I think this would be the worst time to do it unless the senior partners are really desperate for a payout because we're heading into a soft economy. Um, Spinning out an advisory firm into this economy is really putting that advisory firm at great risk because they would have a strong brand out of the box, but then it could be undermined very quickly here. But I think there's just a lot of things, interesting things at play, power things at play here. Of Kelly Greer leaving, which I forgot about, but remembered after that Fortune article. Carmen DeCibio not I don't he's not handling this too well, and I don't see him as a strong CEO either. But for some reason the E&Y structure is always weird because I feel like their global CEOs are never that strong. But he's not looking that strong. He's not really that present. Not like Tim Ryan at PwC. Tim Ryan's everywhere trying to become a celebrity. Carmine DeCibio's not. Maybe they push him out. I mean, I don't know if they'll push him out because typically when you get that position, nobody really challenges you. But if somebody did want to, they could. If somebody continues to leak, like if leaks like this keep coming out, typically stuff like this would not leak out of the big four accounting firms. But if stuff keeps leaking like this, he might step down, or somebody might, keep undermining him. But it's very interesting what's happening with E&Y. It's interesting to think of all the scenarios. It's interesting to think of what comes next. And another thing that Australia Financial Review article talked about was how if they did get rid of this, then they would probably build up a consulting arm right afterwards because it's just the nature of the business, and that's what other partners they spoke to said as well. Like I don't really see the reason of doing this because you're going to end up building a consulting arm by default. It's just natural that would happen. So unless partners are just looking for a payout, that would be the main reason to continue going forward with the split up plan. But that's the news and rumors as of today, June the 6th. We're going to continue to keep an eye on this, continue to keep you updated. Make sure to subscribe to his podcast and check out the show notes for useful links. Thanks for listening.